Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio. Hello and happy Friday. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Tracy V. Wilson.
We talked about Okapi this week.
We did.
Gosh, they're pretty.
Yeah, they are.
This one was good, and I was glad it had the sort of happy ending of discussing how captive populations can be a way to sustain conservation efforts.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are people that have very mixed feelings about zoos and aquariums and that animals should not be held in captivity. I mean, I feel like for a lot of them, this is a nice offshoot, whether it started out in the right headspace or not, that we started collecting animals. This is a way that many of those facilities have become really vital to making sure we continue to have those animals for theoretically the rest of time. So just know that's something that's always on my mind. I, have volunteered with various such facilities, and I know I always get a little bit heartsick when I hear people talking about how the people that work there don't care about animals and they're just in it for money. And I'm like, I don't know any biologist that has worked in one of those facilities that is rich, and they certainly will sometimes give up their personal lives almost entirely to make sure the animals are cared for. So,
yeah.
I have definitely seen staff. I definitely knew one that spent Christmas Day, despite having children, at the facility, ran home to do gift time, and then came right back to make sure that an animal that was having some health needs was being taken care of around the clock. So, just know there are a lot of dedicated people in those facilities that kind of should not be lumped in as like part of a capitalist driven problem. Anyway, that's my little mini soapbox. Boy, I didn't put a lot of it in here, but it sure is frustrating to read accounts by white people traveling through Africa thinking they understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And saying sort of weird things about the indigenous peoples there. Johnston's brother was with him at one point and wrote this account about how when they went to get the men who had been kidnapped from the Mbuti tribe, that one of the men had died already. And according to this person, Johnston had negotiated with the Mbuti people that they were supposed to bring home to let him have the skeleton stripped by ants so he could ship it back to Europe.
Whoa.
And I'm like, are you real confident about this, dude? But you can't go back in time and say that to them as they're writing it. But that was my I'm not confident that's really what happened here.
No.
Yeah, that's a whole weird thing. There was one person in the midst of all of this that was very interesting to me. He was a Catholic missionary that was in Africa named Brother Joseph Hutsabout. I'm guessing on that pronunciation. And he, for some reason, had the touch with Okapi. Like, he could manage and raise captive Okapi and keep them very healthy. And various people, including the Belgian government, asked him if he would be the official guy to do that. And he was like, I'm here because I'm a missionary. No, I'm not going to do that for you.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, we'll find somebody else. And I was like, yeah, but he was the only one who knew how to take care of them. Why are you all so horrible? Yeah. I thought he should get a shout out for going, no. I don't want to be part of this machine. It's interesting. Yeah, that whole found a new species thing that always comes up. I'm like, no, he did not.
Yeah.
I know that's probably picking nits.
Well,
it makes me crazy.
It reminds me of, when we talked about the platypus, and when we were talking about the platypus and how it was this argument among mostly European naturalists to decide how to categorize an animal that the indigenous people already knew lots about, not necessarily the exact kind of things that the naturalists are trying to figure out, and not so much like organization into this Western developed
taxonomy,
European taxonomy. But like there were some parallels there in terms of multiple different aspects of it.
I mean, right, it's all coded and framed in this weird conceit of like, we know better than anyone else, which is just so problematic, and it comes up on the show all the time, but I'm always just like, dudes.
Yeah.
I'm laughing in frustration because it is hard to read that stuff and think about how just foolishly conceited so many explorers have been. While at the same time, I will confess that I like seeing an okapi from time to time, so I understand the draw. Oh, I did want to mention, there was a particularly interesting piece of footage that was shown during that John Lucas lecture we mentioned during the show, where he was talking about how hard it is for people to see okapi. And he was like, just look at this. And it's literally a like 15 or 20 second piece of footage from like what appears to be a setup camera in the forest that's not manned. And you see the animal like right up by the camera, and then it turns and it walks 10 feet away and you can't see it.
Wow.
Because, you know, its rump is striped in such a way that once it gets behind like a stick of foliage, like it just blends right in, and you can't, it's really hard to visualize. If you're, I mean, you can see it. You can be like, oh, I see, there's where the head went. Because you watched it go, but you wouldn't ever pick it out from the forest naturally if you were just walking along, even if you were looking for it, because those stripes are so effective at camouflaging it. And it is such a quiet little shy thing that it's not little, it's a large animal. In my heart, it's Lil. It's Lil. But they are so extraordinarily beautiful. So I'm glad that there are huge conservation movements around them. You and I also discussed before we started recording how much like political upheaval there is in that area anyway. And it's one of those things that I feel for conservationists and the people there that just want to like protect animals and keep these preserves, you know, healthy and protected, and like how hard it must be when you are living in a world that doesn't prioritize that at all and has its own conflicts that are huge and terrifying going on around you.
Right.
So that's just my hats off to those people. Because that happens in a lot of places around the world where there are people just trying to preserve the natural species that are being encroached upon by civilization, that are being, you know, endangered through people poaching, like actively trying to cause problems, but also just people who are in expanding populations that are trying to find their own way to live and survive. And it's a hard balance. I know I couldn't do that job. I think I would be depressed all the time. Just reading about it is sad making. So
yeah.
So thank you to everyone who does it. Yeah, if you can, check out some cool videos of okapi vanishing into the forest. It's quite striking and moving. Is a good reminder that as busy as our world is, there are still very shy, beautiful animals just trying to have their vegetarian diet. We talked about Theda Bara this week. She's very fun because there's not a lot of tragedy going on.
Yeah.
There's absolutely cockamamie things that happened in relation to the studio and how they presented her. But she is a very fun one.
Yeah. She has a lot of things in her life, more her career than her life, that are just sort of evidence of how early in the film industry various standards were set. Like the idea that 30 is old.
Well, that was for the stage as well.
Stage,
like just for acting in general. Like if you wanted to be any kind of like in the public eye performer.
Yeah.
30 was hagged out, man.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah, there's also that whole thing about how she was too curvy to be considered like the cute ideal. And if you watch A Fool There Was, she looks very long and lean to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that that came up in several sources about her, about how curvaceous she was, I was like, oh, mon Dieu.
Yeah, unattainable body standards.
Yeah, already there, already in place. There were some fun things about her life that didn't make it into the episode. One is that first play that she was in, The Devil,
Mm-hmm.
this is for my old school film and TV buffs. She was, a small part, but one of the leads in that play was Marion Lorne. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you, Tracy.
It does not.
And I don't know if you grew up watching Bewitched like I did rabidly. She played Aunt Clara, so she, Marion Lorne was touches base with Theda Bara. I also wanted to mention this interesting note that we mention it that she is very pantomime-y earlier on in the filming of A Fool There Was, which was, her first time on film, really, other than that one very small bit part. And one biography I read mentioned that she's very stiff in her early shots, but loosens up as the film goes on. And I, having seen it before I read this, thought that was purposeful as a character development choice.
Oh, not
because
as
it kind of works, right?
Yeah.
That she starts out, it's like the presentation of someone called a vampire would of course be very like theatrical and kind of oddly formal, and then loosen up as you see her wild party lifestyle. But that one was very funny to me. It's like,
yeah.
I thought that was on purpose, not because she was struggling,
not because she was learning how to make it do.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an interesting audio clip I heard of her later in life talking about like how hard it was for silent film actors to like try to find that line of like conveying all of the emotions you would normally have in dialogue without being like a crazy marionette about it.
Yeah.
And I think to most of us, they do look often like crazy marionettes, but
well, and especially having done work on stage first, where you were speaking lines.
Yeah.
And to go from that into silent film, I think would be really hard.
Silent film, no rehearsal. There's just like a director yelling at you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, there's a reason she felt very overwhelmed initially. But of course, she became very good at it, did a lot of movies and made a lot of money. I wanted to also talk about how she negotiated her contract from $100 a week to $150 as a complete unknown.
Yeah.
And how that worked, because there is a reason for that. There's a logic behind it. It wasn't just that she was so brazen and skilled at negotiating, although it does sound like she's a pretty good negotiator. There was a clause in her contract, which was very common. This was not just for her, but for a lot of actresses of the time. One of the things studios would do was that basically, and I don't know that the men had the same clause, but women definitely had, that they would provide their own costumes.
Oh.
For any scenario that was not a period piece. So if it wasn't a historical costume, you just had to show up to set in your clothes and they better look great. And she was like, hi, I'm poor. I've been struggling to get a career going in stage for 10 years and have gotten nowhere. So I'm not sure where you think clothes are going to come from. And she's like, I will do it, but you got to up my rate a lot. And that's how she landed there, because they knew this was going to make her famous. Like they knew it was in their best interest to be like, great, we'll acquiesce and give you this money, and that way you can do it. And it paid off. There were often comments in reviews about how amazing her clothes were. So she clearly had great taste and she was good at picking things out. But yes, I find that so funny. If that were to happen today on a film set, people would lose their minds.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what did you bring to wear for this shot? Je m'excuse? Like it would never.
Yeah.
Wouldn't work. I really, really wish we had a cut of Cleopatra.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the costumes.
Yeah, there's stills from it.
Yes.
There are stills from a ton of her stuff available, like a lot of publicity stuff, and going through it to pick a picture to put on her social media. I was like, I would rather have an image that is evocative of her career and not one where she's definitely a white person playing someone of another race.
Yes.
And fortunately, there's a ton of stuff from A Fool There Was where she's playing
just a random person.
Random person. But yeah, there's a ton of it.
I'm going to say something that may make you think I am completely off my rocker. Are you ready?
Sure.
I don't know if this happened. Every time I look at pictures of her that are just shots of her, like with her hair down, not in a big costume or anything, but sort of like probably the equivalent of her headshots. She has this long hair. She has kind of a rounded face. She has very, almost cherubic features. I get heavy Stevie Nicks vibes.
Yeah, as I was looking at pictures, there was one where her hair was down, and I feel like she also had a cape, and I was like, Stevie Nicks is right there.
I'm glad this is not just me. In the best way, I mean, in the most loving and girl, you're fabulous kind of way.
Yeah.
But I had not really put that together until, I don't know, recent years. I remember looking at a picture of her and going, her face structure and the big eyes, and especially with all of the eyeliner,
with all the
she looks
hair and the eyeliner,
a bit like Stevie Nicks, and I love it. She's like, one of the proto-goth girls, even though in her regular life she was kind of
not that at all
prim and very modern.
Yeah.
Which I think really helped her after she retired as well, because she had that image on screen.
Mm-hmm.
When she just went out as herself, like there are accounts of people not recognizing her in public, and then someone being like, hey, that was Theda Bara, and them going, no, that was like a nice lady in a suit.
That was Stevie Nicks.
So it's, I think she kind of got an unexpected benefit from that whole setup.
Yeah.
Which is that she could be anonymous on occasions when she wished to.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do find it very funny how scant her costumes became, considering how chagrined she was to wear a bathing suit initially.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, do we know how she felt about that? If that was something like was just her progressing comfort level, or if it was more like pressure from the studio?
It seems like as things were going on, she got more comfortable with the idea, and I think she had a little streak of defiance in her. So as more people complained, she was like, great, I'm wearing nothing but pasties in this next movie. Like, she was just like, I'm gonna, fine. I don't even know that she was conscious of it, but some of the ways that this gets written up about her, the fact that she would respond to a fan letter criticizing her and being like, oh, honey, if I were that person, you would not be seeing me on a screen.
Yeah.
I'd be just living my casual life. I think probably that was a driver. That's pure speculation on my part, but
that letter reminded me of various things that have happened in more recent years where like people have become outraged at a voice actor for playing a toxic character in a video game.
Yeah.
And the actor being like, this is literally my job to play characters. If I turn down the roles of the villain, I wouldn't really have a career, and you wouldn't have video games that have villains in them.
Right. I mean, on the one hand, too, it was a little refreshing to me to see that, like, even in 1915, people could not grasp the nuance between reality and fiction. And admittedly, like, her presentation as this fictional character probably did not help that. But also, like, just because you see it on a screen does not mean that that is a real thing. It is a play that is on screen.
Right.
Yeah. we fight that today. We see it all the time. So at least we know it has a long and storied history. Here's the thing. Did you see a picture while you were looking from Cleopatra where she is in a spectacular peacock gown?
I don't think I saw the peacock gown.
Holy bajoli. I really, really want to find more pictures of that if I can. And that's the one thing that I would yearn to see of that movie, because it's she has this amazing giant train that's made of feathers and it's super beautiful. And she was something. I also think it's interesting that she was not necessarily growing up. She was never considered especially pretty or attractive, and she became the biggest sex symbol for several years. And that to me just was kind of a funny one of those things. We see it all the time today as well, where actors will be like, no, I've always been a dork. I don't know what this attention's about. So it's, again, has been going on since the beginning of film. But Theda Bara, I hope one day we find some secret cut of something else that she was in, because she's quite interesting.
So much early film is lost
Gone.
And it sucks.
She didn't seem to care when everything got destroyed in the fire. She's like, all right, I'm kind of moved on anyway. So not a lot of sense of her place in history, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
I'm going to go watch movies now.
Okay.
We hope you have a delightful weekend and that you get to watch movies or do whatever it is that brings you joy. If you don't have time off and you have to get a lot of stuff done, I hope that all of those tasks are easy as pie and they get done with very little effort. That would be my dream. And that everybody treats you nicely and that you do the same in return. We will be right back here tomorrow with a classic, and then we'll see you again on Monday with brand new stuff.
Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.